My name is Amelia, and this is the story of how my family's cruelest words became the fuel for my greatest triumph. Growing up in the Richardson household meant living under a microscope of constant judgment and comparison. My parents, Margaret and Robert Richardson, owned a mid-sized manufacturing company that had been in our family for 3 generations. From the time I could walk, it was understood that my older brother Jake would inherit the business, while I was expected to find a nice husband and settle into domestic bliss. But I had different dreams that my family would soon crush with their harsh words and dismissive attitudes. The Richardson Manufacturing Company produced custom metal components for construction projects across the Midwest. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was profitable and respected in our small Ohio town of Millbrook. My grandfather had started the company in 1952 with nothing but determination and a small loan. My father had expanded it considerably during his tenure, and everyone assumed Jake would continue the family legacy. The problem was that Jake had absolutely no interest in the business and even less aptitude for it. He was content to coast through life on the family name and money, spending his days playing golf and his nights at expensive restaurants. I, on the other hand, had always been fascinated by the business side of things. Even as a child, I would sneak into my father's office and study the financial reports spread across his mahogany desk. I learned to read profit and loss statements before I mastered long division. I understood supply chain logistics before I understood algebra. The smell of metal shavings and the sound of machinery filled me with excitement rather than dread. I dreamed of modernizing our operations, implementing new technologies, and expanding into untapped markets. But every time I expressed interest, I was met with patronizing smiles and dismissive chuckles. The breaking point came during my college graduation dinner in May 2018. I had just earned my SBA from Ohio State University, graduating summa cum laude with a concentration in operations management and finance. I was 24 years old and bursting with ideas for improving the family business. The restaurant was upscale, with white tablecloths and crystal wine glasses that caught the light from the chandeliers above. My parents had invited extended family and close friends to celebrate what they called my educational achievement. I thought this would be the perfect moment to finally present my vision for joining the company and bringing it into the 21st century. After the main course, I stood up with my prepared presentation folder in hand. My heart was racing, but I felt confident and prepared. "Mom, Dad, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This degree represents more than just 4 years of study. It represents my preparation to contribute meaningfully to Richardson Manufacturing. I've spent countless hours analyzing our operations, and I have some exciting proposals for growth and modernization." The table fell silent, and I could feel the weight of everyone's attention. I opened my folder and began outlining my carefully researched plans for digital transformation, lean manufacturing principles, and strategic partnerships. My father's face grew increasingly red as I spoke. When I finished, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, he set down his wine glass with a sharp clink that made several people jump. "Amelia," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "this is exactly why women don't belong in manufacturing. You have these cute little ideas, but you don't understand the reality of running a real business." The words hit me like physical blows. My mother nodded in agreement, adding, "Sweetheart, you're a smart girl, but business is a man's world. You should focus on finding a good husband and starting a family. That's where you'll find real fulfillment." The relatives around the table murmured their agreement, as if my 4 years of intensive business education meant nothing. But my brother Jake delivered the cruelest blow of all. He leaned back in his chair with a smirk that I'll never forget and said, "Come on, Amelia. Let's be realistic here. You're a failure when it comes to understanding what this business actually needs. You think some fancy degree makes you qualified to run a company that's been successful for decades? You'd probably run us into bankruptcy within a year with your naive little schemes." His words were like daggers, each one carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage. The entire table erupted in uncomfortable laughter, as if my dreams were nothing more than an amusing entertainment for their evening. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger as I realized that no amount of education or preparation would ever change their minds about my worth. That night, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my entire life. I would prove them wrong, not through arguments or pleading, but through actions that spoke louder than their cruel words. I would build something so impressive, so undeniably successful, that they would have no choice but to acknowledge my capabilities. I started by taking a position with Morrison & Associates, a management consulting firm that specialized in manufacturing operations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave me invaluable experience working with companies across various industries. I learned about lean manufacturing, supply chain optimization, digital transformation, and most importantly, I learned how to identify struggling businesses that were ripe for acquisition and turnaround. For the next 4 years, I threw myself into my work with an intensity that surprised even me. I arrived at the office before dawn and left well after sunset. I traveled constantly, visiting client sites and analyzing their operations from top to bottom. Every project taught me something new about business strategy, operational efficiency, or market dynamics. My colleagues began to notice my dedication and results. Within 18 months, I was promoted to senior consultant. By year 3, I was leading my own team and managing some of the firm's largest accounts. The work was demanding and often stressful, but I found deep satisfaction in solving complex business problems and delivering measurable results for our clients. During this period, I also began developing my own investment portfolio. I lived frugally, saving every penny I could, while learning about financial markets and investment strategies. I studied successful business acquisitions, read every book on corporate finance I could find, and networked with private equity professionals and investment bankers. My apartment was modest, my car was reliable but unremarkable, and my social life was practically non-existent. While my peers were spending their weekends at expensive restaurants and trendy bars, I was analyzing financial statements and researching potential investment opportunities. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile because I knew I was building towards something bigger than myself. The consulting work also gave me unexpected insight into my family's business. Through industry contacts and public financial filings, I began monitoring Richardson Manufacturing's performance from afar. What I discovered was deeply troubling, but not entirely surprising. Under Jake's increasing influence, the company was struggling significantly. They had missed several major technological transitions, their equipment was becoming obsolete, and their customer base was steadily shrinking. Their profit margins were eroding as competitors with more modern operations undercut their pricing. Most concerning of all, they had taken on substantial debt to finance Jake's expensive lifestyle and questionable business decisions. The company that had once been the pride of our family was slowly dying, and no one seemed willing or able to acknowledge the severity of the situation. By early 2022, I had accumulated enough capital and developed sufficient industry connections to begin seriously considering an acquisition strategy. Through my consulting network, I learned that Richardson Manufacturing was privately exploring options for outside investment or potential sale. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. The family that had dismissed me as incapable of understanding business was now desperately seeking help from the very type of expertise they had ridiculed. I began discreetly gathering intelligence about their financial condition, operational challenges, and strategic options. What I discovered exceeded even my pessimistic expectations. They were in far worse shape than I had imagined, with declining revenues, mounting debt obligations, and a management team that seemed completely overwhelmed by the challenges they faced. The acquisition process required careful planning and absolute discretion. I couldn't approach them directly without revealing my identity and intentions prematurely. Instead, I worked through intermediaries and established a limited liability company called Midwest Industrial Solutions to serve as the purchasing entity. My legal team was instructed to maintain strict confidentiality about the true ownership structure. The negotiations were complex and sometimes frustrating, but my consulting experience had taught me patience and strategic thinking. I knew that desperation would eventually force them to accept reasonable terms, and I was prepared to wait for the right moment to strike. Every document, every financial analysis, every strategic assessment confirmed what I already suspected. This acquisition would be both a sound business investment and the ultimate validation of my capabilities. The due diligence process revealed the full extent of their operational and financial problems. Their manufacturing equipment was outdated and inefficient. Their inventory management systems were antiquated, and their customer relationships were deteriorating due to quality issues and delivery delays. Jake had made several costly decisions that demonstrated his fundamental lack of understanding about the business. He had invested heavily in unnecessary equipment while ignoring critical infrastructure improvements. He had alienated key customers through his arrogant and unprofessional behavior. Most damaging of all, he had borrowed heavily against the company's assets to fund personal expenses, leaving them dangerously over-leveraged and vulnerable to market fluctuations. The business that my grandfather had built and my father had expanded was being systematically destroyed by incompetent leadership and poor decision-making. The final negotiations took place in November 2022, almost exactly 4 years after that humiliating graduation dinner. My representatives met with the Richardson family's legal team in a sterile conference room downtown, surrounded by stacks of financial documents and legal contracts. Through my intermediaries, I learned that my parents were devastated by the necessity of selling the family business. My father, now in his late 60s, had expected to retire comfortably while watching Jake successfully manage the company's continued growth. Instead, he was facing the reality that his life's work was crumbling and that outside intervention was necessary to prevent complete collapse. My mother was reportedly struggling with the social implications of the sale, worried about how their friends and community members would perceive their family's failure. Jake's reaction was predictably immature and self-serving. According to my legal team's reports, he spent most of the negotiation sessions blaming external factors for their problems, rather than accepting responsibility for his poor decisions. He complained about unfair competition, changing market conditions, and unreasonable customer expectations. He never acknowledged that his own incompetence and arrogance had contributed significantly to their downward spiral. Even faced with the undeniable evidence of their financial distress, he maintained the same entitled attitude that had characterized his entire approach to the business. His inability to recognize or learn from his mistakes convinced me that I was making the right decision in proceeding with the acquisition. The purchase price was fair but not generous, reflecting the company's distressed condition and limited prospects under current management. The transaction structure included immediate cash payments to satisfy their most pressing debt obligations, along with performance-based earnouts that would provide additional compensation if certain operational improvements were achieved. most importantly for my purposes. The agreement included a provision requiring the current management team to remain in place for at least 6 months following the closing. This would give me time to implement necessary changes while observing their reactions to working under new ownership. I insisted on maintaining absolute confidentiality about the buyer's identity until I was ready to reveal myself at the appropriate moment. The closing took place on December 15th, 2022, in the same downtown conference room where negotiations had occurred. My legal team handled all the formalities, while I remained strategically absent from the proceedings. According to their reports, my family members appeared subdued and defeated as they signed away control of their legacy business. My father reportedly struggled to maintain his composure, while my mother sat silently with tears in her eyes. Jake seemed more concerned about his personal financial situation than the broader implications of the transaction. The business that had defined their family identity for 3 generations was changing hands, and they had no idea that their greatest disappointment was about to become their new boss. I spent the following weeks carefully planning my reveal strategy. The timing needed to be perfect, creating maximum impact while demonstrating my professionalism and competence. I decided to wait until after the holidays, allowing them time to process the initial shock of losing the business before delivering the secondary shock of learning who had purchased it. During this period, I worked behind the scenes with my management team to develop comprehensive improvement plans for operations, technology, and customer service. Every decision was designed to demonstrate that their failure of a daughter possessed exactly the business acumen they had dismissed so contemptuously. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but I knew that patience would make the eventual revelation even more powerful. January 3rd, 2023 was the day I had been waiting for since that horrible graduation dinner. I drove to the Richardson manufacturing facility early that morning, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The building looked exactly as I remembered from childhood visits, but now I owned every brick, every machine, and every square foot of office space. I parked in the space reserved for the company owner. A small but satisfying assertion of my new authority. My plan was simple. I would call a mandatory all-hands meeting and announce myself as the new owner. No dramatic buildup, no elaborate revenge schemes, just the simple truth delivered with quiet confidence and professional dignity. Sometimes the most powerful statements are made through understated actions rather than theatrical gestures. The conference room was packed when I walked in at exactly 9 o'clock. Every employee was present, including my parents and Jake, who had been required to attend as part of their consulting agreements. I could see confusion and curiosity on faces throughout the room as they tried to understand why this young woman was calling mandatory meetings. My father was checking his watch impatiently, clearly annoyed by what he perceived as an interruption to his morning routine. Jake was slouched in his chair, radiating the same disrespectful attitude he had always displayed toward authority figures he didn't recognize. My mother looked tired and defeated, still processing the emotional impact of losing control over the business that had defined their social status and financial security. I walked to the front of the room and turned to face the assembled group. The silence was complete and expectant. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice calm and clear. "I know there's been speculation about the new ownership structure, so I wanted to introduce myself personally and outline my vision for this company's future." I paused, making eye contact with as many people as possible before continuing. "My name is Amelia Richardson, and I am the sole owner of Midwest Industrial Solutions, which means I am now the owner and CEO of Richardson Manufacturing Company." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps echoed throughout the room, followed by excited whispers and shocked exclamations. but my focus was entirely on my family's faces. My father's mouth fell open in complete disbelief. His face went through a series of color changes, from pale white to bright red to an alarming purple shade. He gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white, and I could see him struggling to process what he had just heard. My mother covered her face with her hands and began crying, though whether from shame, pride, or shock, I couldn't determine. But Jake's reaction was the most satisfying of all. He jumped to his feet so quickly that his chair fell backward with a loud crash. "This is impossible," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "There's no way you could have bought this company. Where would you get that kind of money? This has to be some kind of joke or mistake." I remained perfectly calm as chaos erupted around me. "I understand this is surprising," I said, raising my voice slightly to be heard over the commotion. "But I assure you, it's completely legitimate. I've spent the past 4 years building the experience and capital necessary to make this acquisition. My consulting work provided both the industry knowledge and the financial resources required to identify and purchase underperforming manufacturing companies." I gestured toward the stack of legal documents on the table beside me. "Everything is properly documented and legally binding. I am now responsible for this company's operations, its employees' livelihoods, and its future success or failure." The room gradually quieted as people began to absorb the magnitude of what was happening. Jake was still standing, swaying slightly as if he might faint. "But you're a failure," he sputtered desperately. "You don't know anything about running a business. Dad always said you didn't understand how the real world works." His words hung in the air like a desperate plea, but they no longer had the power to hurt me. Instead, they revealed the pathetic desperation of someone who had just realized that his entire worldview was crumbling. I looked at him with something approaching pity rather than anger. "Jake," I said quietly, "the real world is exactly what I've been learning about for the past 4 years. While you were spending the company's money on golf memberships and expensive dinners, I was building the skills and resources necessary to save it." My father cleared his throat and struggled to meet my eyes. "Amelia, I owe you an apology. We all do. We were wrong about your abilities and your potential. I can see now that you've accomplished something remarkable, something that, frankly, I'm not sure I could have done at your age." His admission was harder for him than I had expected, and I felt a surprising surge of sympathy for the man who had spent decades dismissing my dreams. I made terrible assumptions based on outdated thinking about gender roles in business. I let my pride and stubbornness blind me to your obvious intelligence and determination. The words seemed to cost him considerable effort, but I could tell they were sincere. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said, and I genuinely meant it. "But apologies alone won't fix the problems this company is facing. We have serious operational challenges, customer relationship issues, and financial constraints that require immediate attention. If you want to be part of the solution, I need your commitment to supporting necessary changes rather than defending past mistakes." I could see him nodding slowly as he processed my words. "The business that Grandpa built and you expanded deserves better than what it's been receiving lately. I'm offering everyone a chance to help restore it to its former success, but only if you're willing to put the company's needs ahead of your personal pride or comfort." Over the following months, the transformation was remarkable to witness. Once my family accepted the reality of the situation, they began working with genuine dedication to help implement the improvements I had planned. My father proved to be a valuable resource for understanding long-term customer relationships and industry history. His knowledge of manufacturing processes and quality standards was extensive, and he was able to provide crucial insights that helped me avoid several costly mistakes. My mother took on administrative responsibilities with surprising enthusiasm, organizing files and updating systems that had been neglected for years. Even Jake, after an initial period of sulking and resentment, began contributing meaningfully to marketing and customer service efforts. The operational improvements yielded results more quickly than I had anticipated. New equipment increased production efficiency by 30% while reducing waste and improving product quality. Digital inventory management systems eliminated chronic overstocking and shortages that had plagued customer relationships for years. Updated financial controls provided clear visibility into profitability by product line and customer segment, enabling much more strategic decision-making. Most importantly, the improved reliability and customer service began attracting new business while strengthening relationships with existing clients. Within 6 months, we had not only stopped the decline, but actually achieved modest growth in both revenue and profit margins. The personal relationships took longer to repair, but they gradually improved as well. My parents began treating me with genuine respect and seeking my input on family decisions beyond just business matters. Jake struggled more with the adjustment, but he eventually acknowledged that his previous behavior had been immature and destructive. He began asking thoughtful questions about business strategy and seemed genuinely interested in learning from my experience. The family dinners that had once been tense affairs, filled with criticism and comparison, became opportunities for collaborative planning and mutual support. It wasn't a complete transformation overnight, but it represented real progress toward healthier dynamics. What would you do if your family dismissed your dreams and called you a failure? Would you have the patience and determination to prove them wrong through years of disciplined work? I learned that success is the most powerful form of vindication, but it's also the most demanding path to choose. The satisfaction of purchasing my family's company wasn't just about proving my capabilities. It was about saving something valuable that was being destroyed by incompetent management. Sometimes the people who doubt us most are the ones who need our help most desperately, even when they don't realize it. The story doesn't end with a dramatic confrontation or cruel revenge because real life is more complex than movie scripts. Instead, it ends with a family learning to respect each other's contributions and a business being restored to health and profitability. My grandfather's legacy is secure. My father's life work has been preserved, and Jake is finally learning skills that will serve him throughout his career. Most importantly, I've proven to myself and everyone else that determination and competence can overcome even the most entrenched prejudices and assumptions about what's possible. If this story resonates with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who doubted your abilities? What challenges have you overcome to achieve your goals? Your stories inspire others who might be facing similar struggles. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future stories. I upload 3 to 4 new stories every week. And your support helps me continue sharing these experiences with others who might benefit from hearing them. Here's how we can decide what story comes next. Comment below with the topic you'd most like to see me cover next week. If any single story suggestion gets 50 or more comments supporting it, that will become my next video topic. Whether it's about workplace drama, family conflicts, relationship challenges, or career achievements, I want to tell the stories that matter most to you. Subscribe now so you don't miss whichever story wins. And thank you for being part of this community where we celebrate resilience, determination, and the power of proving doubters wrong through our actions rather than our words.